Otherwise, honestly, Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, full steam ahead, you guys. Charlie would want us to get back to work, and that's what we're doing. We have...
Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I just listened to something that genuinely made my skin crawl. Like, I'm not even being dramatic right now. We're talking about the leaked Erika Kirk audio that has absolutely broken the internet. And let me tell you, after hearing the full context of what was said, this situation is so much more complex than anyone initially thought. We've got the full audio breakdown, reactions from across the political spectrum, and some really important context that changes how we should view this entire situation. This is about to get deep, so let's jump straight into it. All right, so for context, there's been this leaked audio circulating online allegedly featuring Erika Kirk on a Zoom call with Turning Point USA employees. The audio supposedly took place shortly after a tragic event, and when clips started going viral, people had extremely strong reactions. We're talking thousands of comments, think pieces, video responses, the whole 9 yards. The conversation around this audio has touched on everything from how people process grief differently to questions about workplace culture and political organizations. Now, the reason this blew up so massively is because of the tone and content of what was allegedly said. People expected one thing based on the context, but what they heard was something completely different, and that disconnect is what has everyone talking. The audio was reportedly leaked to Candace Owens, who's been very vocal about internal dynamics at Turning Point USA, and when she shared it, the response was immediate and intense. So let's get into what was actually said on this call, because the details matter here. Erika starts off pretty casually, mentioning Zoom emojis and keeping things light. But then the conversation shifts to discussing a memorial event, and this is where people started raising eyebrows. She then describes the event as incredibly successful, talking about attendance numbers, how many people heard the message, and the overall impact. Then comes the part that really caught people's attention. Erika starts discussing business metrics like voter registration numbers and merchandise sales. And I'm talking specific numbers here, over 200,000 in merch sales. Now, for a lot of people listening, hearing someone discuss sales figures in this context felt jarring. Like, the tonal shift from memorial to metrics was what made people uncomfortable. Erika then goes on to thank various teams for their work. The events team, the development team, graphic designers, production crews. All of that makes sense, right? People did work and deserve recognition. But it's the enthusiasm and energy in the delivery that people found off-putting. She then mentions staff working 20-hour days during a period of grieving, and frames it almost like a badge of honor, rather than acknowledging how difficult that must have been. Here's another part that generated a lot of discussion. When addressing the topic of time off for employees who might need to grieve, Erika says that if people need additional time, they should talk to their director about using paid time off. Now, some people heard that and thought, okay, that's standard HR policy. But others felt like it was dismissive, especially given the circumstances. The implication seemed to be that grieving beyond a certain point would need to come out of your personal leave, rather than the organization providing dedicated bereavement support. She then pivots to a very forward-looking, motivational tone, talking about moving full steam ahead, emphasizing that work continues, and framing the future in terms of growth and expansion. There's mention of new donors, hundreds of thousands of them, and how that's a blessing. More hat orders to fulfill, more chapter requests to handle. The entire framing is about momentum and growth, rather than reflection or mourning. Now, when this audio hit the internet, the reactions were all over the place. You had people who were absolutely shocked by what they heard, saying the tone was inappropriate given the context. Others pushed back and said, look, everyone processes difficult situations differently, and we shouldn't judge how someone chooses to cope. That's actually a really fair point. Grief is not one size fits all, and some people throw themselves into work as a coping mechanism. But here's where it gets interesting. Even people who wanted to give grace and understanding were struggling with certain aspects of the audio. It wasn't just that the person was working through grief by staying busy. It was the specific language choices, the celebratory tone when discussing numbers, the framing of everything as exciting and positive. Multiple commentators pointed out that there's a difference between staying strong and being upbeat about business performance. One of the most viral reactions came from political commentator Hassan, who said he felt more emotional about the situation than what he was hearing in the audio, despite being on the opposite end of the political spectrum. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful, he was just expressing genuine confusion about the presentation. And that sentiment was echoed by a lot of people. They were saying, I don't understand what I'm listening to right now, because it doesn't match what I would expect in this situation. There were also comparisons made to how other people in the organization were handling things. Candace Owens, for example, was visibly emotional when discussing everything. She took time. She processed things publicly. She showed vulnerability. The contrast between different people's responses highlighted that there wasn't a unified approach to how this situation was being handled internally. Some people in the comments were defending her, saying that as a leader, you have to project strength and stability for your team. If you fall apart, everyone falls apart. So sometimes you have to put on a brave face and keep things moving forward. That's a legitimate leadership philosophy. But critics argued that there's a middle ground between falling apart and what they perceived as almost celebrating metrics during a sensitive time. One aspect of this that deserves attention is what it reveals about workplace culture in high-pressure political organizations. The mention of 20-hour workdays, the expectation that people use personal time off to grieve, the emphasis on full steam ahead mentality, all of these things paint a picture of an intense work environment. And look, that's not unique to Turning Point USA. Lots of political organizations, on both the left and the right, have reputations for grinding their staff into the ground. But this situation put a spotlight on that culture in a way that made people uncomfortable. Because it's one thing to work long hours during campaign season or leading up to a major event. It's another thing to maintain that intensity during a period when people might genuinely need space to process emotions. The leaked audio seemed to suggest that there wasn't much room for stepping back, and if you needed that, it was on you to figure it out with your PTO balance. Stepping back from the specifics of this one audio clip, what this situation really sparked was a broader conversation about authenticity, leadership, and how organizations handle crisis. People started asking questions about what they expect from leaders in difficult moments. Do we want vulnerability and emotion, or do we want strength and forward momentum? And the answer is probably that we want some balance of both, but figuring out that balance is really hard. This also opened up discussions about the commercialization of movements and causes. The mention of merchandise sales and donor numbers in the context of a memorial made people reflect on how intertwined business and mission have become in the political space. Again, this isn't unique to one organization or one side of the political aisle. Fundraising off of current events, selling branded merchandise, building email lists, these are standard practices across the board. But when it's laid out so explicitly in leaked audio, it can feel transactional in a way that makes people uncomfortable. There's also the employee perspective that came out through all of this. Apparently, someone who worked at the organization and was let go shortly after these events may have been the source of the leak. That person's experience, working intense hours, then being terminated without clear explanation, adds another layer to the story. It raises questions about how organizations treat the people who work for them, especially during high-stress periods. So where does all of this leave us? Honestly, this situation is complicated, and there's no clean takeaway. On one hand, we have to acknowledge that people handle difficult situations in different ways, and we shouldn't expect everyone to grieve according to some predetermined script. Some people need to stay busy, need to focus on work, need to find purpose in moving forward. That's valid. On the other hand, the specific details in this leaked audio, the tone, the emphasis on metrics, the corporate approach to employee grief, all of that struck a lot of people as tone deaf at best. And when you're in a leadership position, perception matters. Whether the intent was to project strength or to genuinely celebrate organizational growth, the way it landed with a lot of listeners was that something felt off. What I think this really highlights is the tension between being human and being a leader, especially in organizations where so much is riding on public perception and continued momentum. It's possible to be compassionate while also being practical. It's possible to acknowledge grief while also focusing on mission. But finding that balance and communicating it effectively is harder than it looks. The conversation around this audio isn't going away anytime soon. People are going to continue debating what they heard, what it means, and what it says about leadership and workplace culture. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. These kinds of discussions, even when they're uncomfortable, help us think more critically about what we expect from organizations and the people who run them. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. How would you handle leading a team through a crisis? What do you think the right balance is between moving forward and making space for grief? I'm genuinely curious to hear different perspectives on this. Anyway, this concludes today's video. Be sure to subscribe to Loaf for future celebrity videos, and turn on that post notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Until then, see you in the next one.